Death Stranding and No Man's Sky have exactly one major thing in common, and in this video we're going to talk about how those two relate in regards to their pre-launch messaging, talking a little bit about Death Stranding and how excited I am for it, some of the details for it, some of the advantages that a game like Death Stranding has over No Man's Sky, and overall what we can learn and what the developers can learn from this kind of pre-launch rhetoric. Let's get right to it. Fellow Strands, welcome to the LZ. Good to see you. And first things first, a little channel housekeeping here. You might have noticed that I have a bit of a different Twitter handle. That's not that it's different, but that it's a new one. Now, if you followed me on Twitter previously, you know that I get a little political and social over there, and that it isn't quite particularly exclusive to gaming or the channel, and I know that some of you don't like or agree or prefer or whichever, which I can understand. So I figured that I would create a more dedicated Twitter handle directly for the channel for pretty much everybody and anything channel related. Do not worry, my activity on my other Twitter, Legacy0YT, will not be changing, but the new Twitter handle directly for the channel is the LZ Tweets. Go over there, give me a follow for exclusive content, tweets about all things gaming and channel related, and of course all the No Man's Sky love you could ever want to have. But let's get into this topic today, shall we? Death Stranding and No Man's Sky share a very direct similarity, not so much in its game or in its content, though I would say that a lot of what you do in Death Stranding has some similarities gameplay-wise to No Man's Sky, strikingly. But an article was put up today by Games Radar talking about how Hideo Kojima thinks that maybe the game may not be that fun for the first half of it. At least that's how the article put it, but really that's not exactly what he said in the article. So the articles that came out for this were a bit baity, which is a little bit disappointing, but I've got his direct quote here. It says, "Some people say it's almost like the movie Alien, where you were gradually finding out what the whole world is about, what you can do and not do," Kojima explained. "Maybe it gets really fun when you have completed 50% of the game." This is largely out of context for a few different reasons. This isn't to sort of downplay the fun of the first half of the game, but rather getting into the major similarity of what it holds with No Man's Sky is its pre-launch sort of a rhetoric, explanation, its explanation of how the game is, what it is, and I think largely we still don't know what the hell Death Stranding is, and really it's what's most exciting about it. And last week I sort of tweeted about how I was thinking or even hoping that Death Stranding was sort of a socio-political commentary on what the world might look like as a result of sort of social and political division. The sort of end game to what it all looks like, maybe with a bit of a supernatural spin to it. And even just today, there were articles that went up about how Hideo Kojima draws a lot of inspiration for Death Stranding with current events, particularly the events in America and the EU. Reading from comicbook.com, according to Hideo Kojima, Death Stranding is partially inspired by President Trump, the current state of America, and even the EU. That's right, most games are inspired by the classics or maybe other forms of entertainment, but Death Stranding is somehow related to Trump's America. In case you didn't notice, a central theme of Death Stranding is division. It's about America, confirmed Hideo Kojima, but it's also not about America. Kojima notes the map doesn't look like the map of America because he wants players to think about where they're from when they're playing the game. Kojima is quoted as saying, "It's about America, but I think that map deliberately not correctly America," said Kojima while speaking to Game Informer. "Maybe it looks like Japan from that angle. I want people to not think about America, but where you are. Because it depends on who is seeing it, and of course, it's in the future and everyone's connected by the internet. But everyone is fragmented. That's kind of a metaphor as well." So let me unpack that. There's a whole lot of themes being played here, and if you know and if you have played Hideo Kojima's games throughout the history, majorly things like Metal Gear Solid particularly, you know that there's a lot of political and social themes involved. Things like a person's legacy, digital information, mercenary and PUC combat, or a sort of guns for hire type of situation. How war would eventually evolve to be sort of a war economy, right? These are all issues that he has sort of delved into over the Metal Gear Solid series, and really they're very well detailed and very well thought out for how zany they get. But Hideo Kojima is a visionary, right? We're all excited for his games. Now, Legacy Zero, you're saying, where does this come into the similarities with No Man's Sky, and what the hell are you talking about? Removing any gameplay similarities, like aka finger quotes, walking simulator or whatnot, the major similarity comes with, for either game before launch, we were super excited for what we were seeing, but none of us, or barely any of us, knew what the hell we were looking at. What is this game? What exactly are you doing? And both Sean Murray and Hideo Kojima are barely giving us enough to go by, yet we were so thirsty to buy these games at launch. And of course, it's hard to say that this is not deliberate, right? It's not even so much a marketing scheme, but more so if I were the creator of a game that came dripping with story and content and a message and is potentially controversial, I wouldn't want to put all of that stuff out for you to digest. I would want you to just buy it, play it, experience it, bitch about it on the internet. All of these things are important, right? And I think that's what they're doing. There's been no lack of Kojima ever doing that in history, that's for sure. If you remember, Sean Murray did this with No Man's Sky leading up to his launch, right? And I think it was very deliberate that he didn't exactly want to tell people what No Man's Sky was. He wanted people to just find out for themselves, right? He didn't want to ruin this experience for people. Now, as you may know, that didn't quite work out at launch. Awkward. No Man's Sky had a very controversial launch. Accusations of lies, missing content, blah, blah, blah. Of course, No Man's Sky Beyond just launched at its 3-year anniversary, and the game is getting some pretty rave reviews now. It seems people like it. They love the VR. They love the quality of life fixes. I put my review for the game out yesterday. Click the card up top or the end screen at the end of the video there to watch that. I recommend it. Now let's talk about the dissimilarities to this particular situation in regards to the pre-launch messaging. Sean Murray and Hello Games are a tiny team. They had virtually no pedigree, no history, aside from Joe Danger and Joe Danger 2, which were tiny indie titles that went on to do well, funded the company pretty good, moved to other viable platforms like Steam and mobile, and that's it. That they didn't have a publisher backing, so to speak, not at least in the funding department. Now, the difference between Sean Murray and Hideo Kojima is that of pedigree, history. Sean Murray isn't nearly as legendary as Hideo Kojima, at least not in the right ways. And like them or not, they both carry a deeply controversial but accomplished atmosphere about them. It's kind of funny how they sort of relate in that regard. So what's the point of bringing all of this up, you're probably asking? And first things first, I know that it's a Hideo Kojima game. I know that it is a single player for the most part, but campaign experience, first party title by Sony. So is No Man's Sky. But the big difference, and obviously the difference in the conversation surrounding the two, is that Hideo Kojima, obviously being the legend that he is, but he's no longer with Konami. He doesn't have exactly the same pull that he did back in the day, right? Which is possibly why they separated sort of aggressively. But Kojima also has the funding behind him. He has the support behind him. He has the Decima engine that came directly from those at Guerrilla, or at least for the majority. Hideo Kojima and Kojima Productions, they have a gigantic following behind them. It's weird how that works. I know they don't really call themselves Kojima Productions anymore, but god damn it, that's what they are to me. So obviously be wary of the game at launch, right? Keep your expectations to where they are, but I think this ultimately comes down to this point. Should this be the kind of messaging that we get for any game? And I think honestly, it is really the opposite to what many of you or some would think. I think it absolutely always should be the type of messaging that we get for games, especially with this much depth and this much allure. The point is to not screw it up when it's all said and done and the rubber hits the road. That was one thing that Sean Murray and Hello Games sort of failed to do at launch, whether it was directly their intention or not. That's typically the perception that we get. And I have no doubt that we'll get a well-cohesive game in depth Death Stranding when that launches. I think it's November. But that's the similarity that the two carry. It's really interesting, and I'm really hyped for both games. Happy to see where this goes. I'm happy that Kojima is finally out to do things that he loves again. That's really important, because practically Konami had him chained it to a desk doing, just make more Metal Gear games, Kojima, and I think he's glad to be free from that. And just like Sean Murray is probably glad to be free from the AAA giant like EA, for instance, right? Being able to take your own creative and directorial liberties and agencies has to feel super good, right? And not many game companies would touch themes that he's hinting at about, like going in on Trump's America or stuff like that. And to be fair, I mean, even if you kind of sort of cringe or scoff at finger quotes political stuff in video games, you have to admit that it is compelling material, right? I think it's something that's well worth exploring, and it doesn't really have to matter who's president. We've already been divided for generations, it seems. I'd kind of like to see what an artistic and haunting view of the end game of what that would look like be. Maybe some of us we can learn some goddamn lessons from it. But travelers, if you found this video informational and useful to your Death Stranding and No Man's Sky experience, please do like, subscribe, share, etc., etc. Always good having you here, and a special thanks to those who have been contributing to the PC fundraiser for the LZ here. I've got kind of an old crotchety PC that I'm looking to replace. I'm broke as hell, and it certainly helps. The individuals on the screen help to raise at least a quarter of what I need already. You too can contribute to the fund as well by checking the description below, but even just giving a like to the video would certainly help the LZ. Of course, those who contribute to the LZ monthly, your name is on the screen now as well. Super thanks to you too, and I thank you for stopping by the LZ, and see you in the next one.